Okay, and moving right along, I have entitled this section of the course "Getting to Know Your New Favorite Synth," because I'm very confident that it will become that. When you open Massive for the first time, it may seem sort of daunting. There's a lot going on here, a lot of knobs and faders, but I promise you that by the end of this course, you will have a very thorough mastery of the entire software, and you'll be able to use it to do all your bidding. Okay, so just trust me about that, and stick with me, and you'll be very glad that you did. So this lecture is about the user interface of Massive, how it's designed, and how to navigate the software itself. The philosophy that Native Instruments employed when designing the user interface is sort of everything very close at hand. It's just one page, essentially, one window, with the exception of the center window, which I'll get to it in a moment. But everything is sort of right there at your fingertips, or your mouse pointer tip, and I really like that. That's one of the things I enjoy the most about this software. So let's just start walking through some of these different pieces in a cursory way, and of course later on in the course we'll get into each in more detail. So up at the top you have sort of a local menu, some options. You can browse, you can create new sounds, open sounds, save your sounds here. There's a drop down menu to select all the presets in here. There's some monitoring information here. This up and down arrow will take you through the presets one by one. Go back to new sound, and then you can save here as well. This is important. There is a view section, and there are three options. There's synth, which is located, and you can see it's indicated by this blue halo around the synth. This is where you're going to be programming and designing your sounds, is under the synth tab. There's an attributes page, which we'll talk more about later, and there's a browser tab. But let's not worry about those just yet. Let's talk about the synth, because this is where you're going to spend 90% of your time. On the left-hand side, you have three oscillators. 1, 2, 3. And again, we'll talk about what oscillators are later. And then you have a modulation oscillator below those. And below all of that, you have a noise generator and a feedback generator. And you'll notice that with many of these parameters, you can send them to the filters. Filter 1, F1, and filter 2, F2. And you can mix the send between the two filters. Which leads us to the filter section, which is up here in the top middle. And then you have two filters, one up here, two here, and you can select different types of filters. You have a mix fader to the right of those filters. And so you can create a blend between the two filters by using this fader. Directly to the right of the filter section is the amp, bypass, and global master knob here. Underneath those, you have two effects tabs. And you can drop down these menus and select different effects. And then the third tab in this area is the equalization tab. If this is all moving quickly, remember we're going to talk about all of these specifically. We're going to give lots of time to each one. Underneath these three tabs is the center window, which is right here. And the center window contains 6 different tabs plus 8 modulation sources. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. We'll talk about what a modulation source is. There's no hierarchy between these two tabs, okay? That confused me at first. These these 6 tabs are completely independent of the 8 modulation sources. You have 4 envelopes, and then 4 LFO performer or steppers. Okay, don't worry about that. So these 6 tabs open up different windows within the center window. You have an oscillator, sort of a global oscillator parameters. You have key tracking oscillator parameters, key tracking filters, some voicing parameters, your routing section. We will talk a lot about routing. And then you have some global parameters here. Below the center window are 2 inserts, and you can drop down the menus here as well. And then in this bottom right hand corner is the macro control section. And the macro controls basically allow you to, well, it just, as it sounds, it allows you to control certain parameters with sort of one knob, and you have 8 different macro knobs that you can assign to your MIDI keyboard, or you can alter with automation within your host DAW, and you can set these to different target parameters within the synth. And again, I know I'm repeating myself. We're going to talk about all these in great detail later on. So if there's a lot of vocabulary in there that you weren't quite understanding, that's all right. We will get into all of that. But I wanted to just give a quick overview of what's going on in the user interface, so that we can move on from there. So once again, you have your 3 oscillators on the left, a modulation oscillator. Below that, you have your noise generator and a feedback generator. Up at the top, 2 filters, an amp section, a effects section with 2 effects parameters, 2 effects tabs, and an EQ tab, equalization tab. And then you have your center window with 6 different parameter tabs, and then 8 modulation sources, 4 LFOs, 4 envelopes. You have 2 inserts here at the bottom, and then you have your macro control section. And it's kind of nice if as you can see, these are sort of sectioned off visually with bars or rectangles or whatever, and that, just keep that in mind, that the designer wants you to understand the software. They're not trying to make it difficult for you. So use that visual language to sort of help yourself get a feel for what this software is all about. So that's the overview of the user interface. Let us move on to the next lecture. We'll see you there.